Hey guys, Jason here at Detail King. Just wanted to talk about headlight restoration. Cloudy headlights not only look bad, but they also make for unsafe driving conditions at night. Detail King has headlight restoration kits for professionals looking to offer headlight restoration services. Headlight restoration is a great add-on for any detailing business because it's extremely easy to do and it's very profitable. Today we're going to show you how to professionally restore oxidized headlights. Our process involves cleaning, sanding, polishing, and then applying a new UV protective coating to the lens. This process usually takes 45 minutes to an hour to complete, depending on the condition of the headlights. Before we start, we're going to tape off the areas around the headlight to help avoid sanding and polishing those areas by mistake. We're going to start with cleaning the headlight using a product called pre-treatment. You will typically see a brown or yellow color coming off the lens or onto the towel when you do this step. The cleaning step's important even if you've already washed the car, because there's going to be dirt that's embedded in that oxidation that just doesn't come off with your typical wash. The pre-treatment will also start to break down that oxidation as well, so that when we go to do our sanding, the sanding process is a little bit easier. After you're done cleaning with the pre-treatment, we'll do our sanding steps. For each of these sanding steps, we're going to use sandpaper and then a product called Sand Easy. Sand Easy is a sanding lubricant that will not only lubricate the surface as we're sanding, but it will also help to break down the oxidation that's on the surface. Typically, we'll start with 600 grit, then move up to 1000, 1500, and then finish up at either 2000 or 2500 grit. The first step of sanding with the 600 grit paper will be the most important. This is where the main correction is taking place, and the rest of the sanding steps are just to make the sanding scratches finer and finer until they're fine enough to polish out. You'll want to fold the sandpaper up roughly to about 1.5 inches to 2 inches wide, so it's not much wider than a few fingers. This will keep even pressure beneath your fingers as you sand, and you won't have gaps which don't get as much sanding pressure applied to them. What we're looking for in this first step is to make sure that the headlight is consistently sanded throughout the entire light. You shouldn't have any shiny spots, there shouldn't be any splotchiness or inconsistencies in the finish, and it should be completely cloudy. If you do have shiny spots or any areas that look different than others, you'll want to continue with the 600 grit sanding until you get a nice and even finish. Once you have that, you can move on to the 1000 grit sandpaper. Each sanding step from here on will be a little bit easier and quicker, and what you want to focus on is making sure that you sand the entire light consistently. You don't want to miss any areas or sand more in some areas than others. It will be a little bit harder to tell what was and wasn't sanded compared to that initial sanding step, so have the process of working your way across the light so that you don't miss any areas. Depending on the size of the light and the access you have while you're sanding, you could even switch directions with your sandpaper on each step, and that would make it a little bit easier to tell when you've sanded all the scratches out. Lots of headlights won't be as easy to do this with, so that's why I mentioned having a standard process of working all the way across the light in a somewhat methodical fashion. You're going to continue on from 1000 grit to 1500 grit to at least 2000 grit, and then you could even go on as high as 2500 grit if you want to make the polishing process just a little quicker and easier. Once you're finished with all the sanding steps, you'll want to move on to the polishing step. Whether you finished off at 2000 grit or 2500 grit, we're going to use a product called Cleaner Polish from the Headlight Restoration Kit. This can be done by hand, but you'll definitely get better results and it'll go much quicker if you have a polisher that you can use. You would want to use a light cutting pad or heavy polishing pad with your polisher. When you're done polishing, you'll want to wipe down the headlight with some of the pre-treatment solution that we used in the beginning for cleaning. This will make sure the surface is completely clean and that there's no polish residue or oils left behind from your polishing step. The final step is going to be to apply the shine restorer. This is not only going to add a gloss and shine up the headlights, but it's also going to give UV protection so that the headlight doesn't just oxidize again quickly. You don't want to sand and polish without applying a protection because that oxidation is going to come back very quickly. We do 3 to 4 applications of the shine restorer and usually get about the same amount of protection that the headlight had originally when it was brand new. When applying the shine restorer, we're going to use a shop grade paper towel and fold it up into about the width of a few fingers like we did with the sandpaper. You want to make sure to wet the entire top of the towel so you don't have any dry spots that would remove product as you're trying to apply it. Start wiping in one motion from right to left or left to right and work from the top of the headlight down to the bottom. Don't wipe back and forth and don't go over areas more than once unless you have a ton of excess product running down the light. Pay attention to where you start and stop to make sure that you don't have any bubbles or runs of product, and make sure you're overlapping each time you go across the light so you don't miss any areas. If you do see streaks or any uneven lines, don't try to fix them right away. Let the first application dry for a few minutes and then you can apply another layer. If you have excess product on the light or product that's running down the light, you'll want to wipe that off right away, which will probably cause a streak. But again, let that dry and then we can apply another layer. With each additional layer of Shine Restore, you can use a little bit less pressure than your first application, just to make sure that you leave as much product on the light as possible. We hope this video answered any questions you had regarding the process, but feel free to reach out to us anytime.